Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to talk how fear of the political dreaded U-turn could well scupper rejoining the EU for much longer than may necessarily be the case. But first, if you'd like to stay informed of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, in terms of where we are on the Brexit debate, I am very much now a rejoiner. Going to have to keep getting used to that. There are all sorts of very strange uses of language that are going to now change. For example, are we going to leave the EU or going to stay in the EU? Used to be a relatively straightforward question. Now it's quite a difficult one because now that we've left, have we left? Are we sort of? Yes. We're no longer a member of the EU, but we're still in everything that Brexiteers said was bad about the EU. Are we still in? From their point of view, yes, we are, even though they say we're not. From my point of view, actually losing the membership was pretty bad because I want my country to have influence. This is the thing when a lot of Brexit supporters will say to me, oh, stop tearing your country down, you should support your country. I do support my country. I want my country to have power. I want my country to have influence, even if that influence is wielded by the buffoon Boris Johnson. Leaving our membership means we've lost that influence, but we're still in everything else. In terms of thinking now, how do we rejoin the EU? That could be something that takes a very long time. It could be something that's done relatively quickly, and trying to think through all the various barriers to it. Because that's what we've got to do now. I think too often in the past, we just expected our political leaders to sort it out for us. They failed us. They failed us very badly on all sides. So there's going to have to be an element of grassroots movement here. And one thing that the Remain side did very badly before is it didn't take the threat of Brexiteers seriously enough. Nowhere near seriously enough. Dismissed, they were, dismissed. And it was easy to dismiss at the start. Of course it was, because they were quite small, but they got bigger and more influential. So, considering what will be the real challenges ahead, as well as steps that need to be taken, is going to be absolutely crucial in order to rejoin as soon as possible. That soon as possible, maybe 25 years' time. It's possible it's in like 8 years' time. You know, 5 years for another general election, get a government that's more pro-European, and then another few years to negotiate and get back in. You know, it's somewhere between there, in all likelihood. But if it's going to be as sooner rather than later, then you do need those things. You need... you're probably talking about the Labour Party to get fully behind rejoining there. That will be easier to do. I wouldn't expect the new leadership to do that immediately. It'll be a lot easier to do once Brexit has actually happened, which is scheduled to happen at the end of this year. So 2021 will be an absolutely key year. But 2020 is key as well. We mustn't just wait for 2021. 2020 is laying the groundwork, pointing out to people what was promised and what's the reality. 2021 is when the real reality hits, and we have to keep people's minds focused on it. At which point, if that is successful, if that campaign is successful, inevitably Labour will swing behind rejoin, because they do not have, they're not carrying as much Brexit baggage. There is still a lot, don't get me wrong. The fact that the current Labour leadership have led to this, they single-handedly could have stopped this and they did not, means that the party carries baggage. But if it's ejected its leader and we've got a more pro-European leader in place, we don't know, we'll have to find that out in April, then the baggage is much less, much easier to shed. But Andrew Adonis, who is a Labour peer and someone, you know, very pro-European, he's actually been active, intelligently active, on the Remain side. And he was fearing that we may not be able to rejoin for 15 years, because what he fears is that we're not going to be able to do this until we've got rid of all the politicians who had a stake in Brexit, who are tainted by Brexit. And this may be true. And it comes to the political U-turn. Now, in a normal job, in sort of jobs that you and I have had and have, it's quite usual at the end of the year or the start of the next year, whatever, to have a review. You know, you review your own performance with your line manager, say, and you go through an appraisal process. And part of that appraisal process is, okay, you know, you had these projects on last year. How did they go? What went well? What do we need to keep going on with? What didn't go as well as planned? And identify the issues and improve them and move forward. And that is a normal part of life for anyone who actually seeks to succeed. In politics, it's very different, because if you acknowledge a mistake in politics, this is dreadful. It's known as the U-turn. It's an accusation used of politicians. Now, I'll tell you what, if a politician gets something badly wrong, and I'm not going to say it's all right if they then admit it was badly wrong, because if they were told it was going to go wrong from the start, they still bear responsibility. But let's say they just get something wrong and they say, yeah, we got that wrong. This is what needs to actually happen, and you do that, then that actually is worthy of a little bit of praise at least. But no, in politics, it's death. If you admit to being wrong, if you commit what's called a U-turn, in other words, you change direction because the direction you're going in was wrong and you want to go in the right direction. No, that's really bad in politics. And the problem is that a lot of people have made various statements and votes on Brexit, and they're sort of semi-committed to them, and they can't just turn around very easily and say, oh yeah, we shouldn't have done that, we should have done this instead. And with those people still in charge of both the Conservatives and the Labour Party, Andrew Adonis fears that until they have gone, until everyone that is tainted with it has gone, and you've got a new breed who can completely disown the past. Because that's the thing about politicians. They can completely disown what happened in the past. Even if they at the time agreed with it, because their fingerprints weren't on it, they can say, oh yeah, it was a ridiculous idea, we know better, and we're going to do better. And it may come to that. It may well be that in 2021, it is a complete mess. And it may well be that we do a good enough job of explaining to people that this mess is caused by Brexit, because how could it be anything else? And that enough people, that critical mass of the British population, go, yeah, this is not what we were promised. We were promised glory. This is a disaster. This is humiliating. We've got no jobs. Well, of course, we're going to have some jobs, but we've got far fewer jobs. Those jobs are not as well paid. The NHS is crumbling. This is an absolute disaster. We want to get rid of this government. They're still stuck with it for a few more years, but we want to get rid of them, and we want to get back into the EU. And let's say there's a real groundswell that cannot be ignored. Not just a majority, but a large majority that is going to have its voice heard at the next general election, particularly if the Labour Party, say, get a leader that people are willing to back. Even Conservatives at that point will be going, oh, but they're committed. And it could well be that even Labour don't fully get behind rejoining because they won't have to. Remember, Labour's competition is always the Conservatives. In an individual seat, it may well be the SNP or the Lib Dems or the Greens or whoever else as well. But ultimately, in the country, in terms of that general election, it's the Conservatives. If the Conservatives are not going to get behind rejoining, and they're not for some time, then Labour don't have to. They just have to be more moderate on it. They just have to attack the Tory Brexit without saying that they're going to completely reverse it in order to appeal. And they may do a halfway house because they personally are also tainted by it. And that is the fear. Because I'll tell you something, I think if you're going to look far in the future, if you're going to look at 20, 25 years, I don't think we need to wait. If we're going to be talking that long in the future, we're not going to need to wait for the Labour Party to fully get behind rejoin. The Conservative Party will as well. Because every year that goes by, the majority of people who voted Brexit who are elderly. Now, I'm going to have to say this again. I don't know why I keep on saying this. People get, oh, stop saying elderly people voted for Brexit. I didn't. I'm elderly. Not everyone did. But the vast majority did. It was a large proportion did. 70% of elderly. I mean, if you want to sub-bracket it, really old people, the people who remember the Second World War, didn't. Of course they didn't. You know, they and their friends and family died to give us closer unity with Europe. It's the baby boomers. It's my parents' generation. But 70% of those who voted that were elderly did vote for that. And 70% of young people opposed it. They wanted to remain. And the demographic is going to shift decisively in favour of staying in the EU. And it's simple. It's this. Young people don't have so much fear of the EU. They haven't bought into the lies to the same extent. And we're going to see the very real consequences of leaving the EU. You may be able to fool some people about the reasons for it, but most people are going to see it for what it is. And as a result, that's why I say it is inevitable at some point. Even if it's 20 years' time when the United Kingdom no longer exists, the various individual remnants that haven't already joined will. Because we'll be seeing that, just like why we joined in the first place, because we were getting left behind. We will get left behind again. We've taken for granted the fact that we caught up and even started to advance. We're going to get left, we already have started to get left behind, we're going to get left behind again. Of course we're going to join again. But by that time, it'll be so obvious that the population at large are in favour of joining. Even the Conservative Party will be back in favour of joining. Remember, it's the Conservative Party that joined in the first place. It was just like the NHS is a Labour creation, Britain's membership of the EU is a Conservative creation. Or the EEC it was at the time, and then the EU. But the EU itself, the reforms were driven largely on the part of a Conservative government in the UK as well. So it is inevitable, but at that point, all of the politicians in both parties will be able to disassociate themselves from the current leaders, their past leaders. And that is a worry, that it may well be that because of pointing fingers about U-turns may stop us joining as soon as we can. And I think for that, being aware of that, we maybe need to make it clear that if there are politicians who are tainted with Brexit, that we'd rather they got behind rejoining than take the blame for what's happened. It'd be much better to say, look, this happened, Labour could have stopped it and they didn't, or various Conservative MPs should have stood against it and didn't. Whatever, if you're willing to do it now, okay, that's fine, let's move forwards. And that may well be the attitude we have to take in order to hasten the process. So anyway, I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.